Pull to open.
Pull to open.
Yes, and what do you do?
Here come the...
Hello, and welcome to Pull to Open, an ongoing quest to watch all of Doctor Who in delightfully random order. I'm Pete Paschal.
And I'm Chris Taylor, and that was not the sound of drums, which we normally have at the opening of every podcast, but that was the scream, or the sting, or whatever you want to call it. It is the sound that signals a cliffhanger. And it is important this week for reasons that we will get to. We will leave that as a cliffhanger for the moment. Why we have just done the scream, a terrible version of it in your ears. We'll get there. But first, we will get there. But first, how have we got here?
Previously on Pull to Open, guys, we've been bouncing around a lot of classic Who. We were at the Aztecs, we went to Meglos, but in between, we paid a little visit to the Whitaker era in Kerblam. But folks, it was all leading up to this week. It was all leading up to a very scream-rific part of season 7 of Doctor Who. So way back in the day, we have done Inferno, one of our very first random episodes.
That's right.
And then sometime later, we encountered a spearhead from space. Good times, good autons, all that happening.
Season 7 goodness.
Yeah, but we have now come to an epic length story. Yeah. It is, of course, season 7, serial 3, The Ambassadors of Death.
And I got to say thank you for preparing me at the end of the last podcast for the point size that they render of death in when they do the title. And it is I was wholly unprepared for that kind of weird interstitial opening that they do. They sort of do the cliffhanger from the previous week as a cold open, but a cold open that's after the credits. It's super weird. Anyway, it introduces the sting, the scream. Pete, what does that noise mean to you? Does it have special meaning in your life?
You know, it's funny. It became the sting at the end of every episode, right? And it's this thing that just triggers in you. Is like, uh-oh, like, you know, the cliffhanger has happened and we're leading into now we're, you know, roll credits, but it's that thing that, you know, emphasizes the peril of whatever's going on, and just like once the scream's over, it's like, okay, discuss. Talk about what you just saw.
So for me, I mean, you how old were you when you first encountered Davison and Who via TV?
Oh God, I was probably either 9 or 10, something like that. Maybe 11.
Because with the sting is the first thing that I remember about Doctor Who. Like, goes all the way back to early Baker when I was just sort of watching it as almost a baby, like basically a toddler, like not fully understanding what was going on. But I knew that music and I knew the sound of that scream, and it sounded like the most terrifying thing I'd ever heard in my young life. So I was hiding behind the sofa from that noise more than anything else. To start with. And then, you know, slowly I caught up and started to understand the show itself. But like the music definitely came first, and that in particular. So it's wonderful to find out its origins here. It's wonderful to find out the creator of the sting. We'll get to that. It's the same person who gave us the TARDIS noise.
Well, I'm also glad they kind of did a version of it for New Who, at least at first, because I know once we got to Davison, once you got to Colin Baker and the other doctors, there was an audio sting to cut to credits, but it wasn't as alien, right? It was more like a variation of the and like in Colin Baker's, it was like even like during Trial of a Time Lord, it was really kind of a cheesy version of like which you might expect from the 80s, but the scream is very unique. It's very like
the scream,
you know, you're drawn into the time tunnel again, but in a way that, you know, you've slipped into it, like you're just cascading down a wet ridge full of water into a waterfall that you have no control over.
That's right. Yeah,
Crazy.
it does. I always think of like an organ being played by Satan. It has that kind of really demonic aspect to it. Just terrifying end of the world noise. Anyway, we're not going to do the whole podcast on the Sting or the Scream. We will get there. We will return to it. And if you would like to fast forward to that, but first of all, by the way, we have to note we are coming up. We are closing in on 100 stories that we have visited here on Pull to
You
Open.
betcha.
This is number 98, which is amazing. I can't believe that we've talked about 98 stories. Now, some of them, we talked about in our early non-random form, but yeah, basically more than 100 episodes we've done at this stage because we've done all of our side quests. Go check those out. But yeah, this is number 98 in the story, and we're really almost a third of the way through.
Right.
Yeah, that's pretty wild. But stay tuned because we're going to do something special for the 100, our top 100 stories.
Well, I got to say, Clara was right that when your navigation is knackered, it's a lot more fun. So good call, Clara. It's been awesome doing 98 or so of these things with you, Chris, and I'm really looking forward to our centennial.
It's been really fun inserting Clara into the narrative 98 times. Looking forward to doing it with 99th. Well, actually, the 98th time is coming up in our end segment where we find out where the Clara Splinter is. And if you want to go straight to the commentary on Ambassador's death, go to the show notes because that will give you the exact time you need to fast forward to. We understand your time is precious. But you want to do that because you have yet to be entertained by the all-new Whomoji challenge and poll results from you and poll to open on what you thought of Kerblam. Did you think it deserved that Kerblam? Or was it more of a damp squib? We're going to find out. And of course, we have a lot to say about the trailer that just dropped. We are recording this on Sunday, September 24th. Roughly 24 hours after our minds were blown by the new 60th anniversary trailer. But that is all coming up in the Pull to Open Pulse Loop.
Of course, fetch a demon.
And first thing in the Pulse Loop, folks, you know what's coming. You must know that one of the best ways to support this here show, Pull to Open, is to, of course, leave a review in the very podcast app you're using, particularly Apple Podcasts. Reviews, especially 5-star reviews, will help make the show more visible to listeners eager for great discussion of Doctor Who. And really, the only way to better show your appreciation for Pull to Open is to share this podcast with a random friend called up from your contact list right now. Go ahead and fire it up, your contacts, pick someone at random, and just, hey, check this out. Check out the podcast. That is totally permissible, and you can go ahead and blame me if they say, what is this, spam? Just say, hey, the guy said to do it.
Yeah, and just send them a picture of an astronaut's helmet looking, blank and terrifying. And nice. Then they'll get
astronaut helmet and skull.
Yes.
There you go.
Ooh. Yeah, now we're not just referencing Ambassadors of Death, but also Sounds of the Library. Love it. Wow, there's also something else to talk about.
Something for our next segment, I think. I just did.
Hey, I love it. Okay. All right,
Which
well, the next
is,
segment.
Of course, the Whomoji Challenge.
Hey.
All right. So we're going to be exhausting our supply of Whomoji isotopes here.
Oh my goodness!
And this, I think, is the last one we have in our reservoir. So, folks, we need a reload.
Yeah.
If you have some thoughts on Doctor Who show titles, Doctor Who story titles, and want to translate those to emoji form, do so. And please send them our way, because then we can use those to torture one Chris Taylor as he racks his brain trying to think of the right Doctor Who story when I describe emojis to him. Which I'm
and it's been an easy few weeks for me. I'm feeling quite confident after Dragonfire last week. I just got that. Our guest, unfortunately, Mark did not get the correct guess. He guessed Mind of Evil, which is the first thing I was going to guess because the first emoji was dragon. And then I got Dragonfire almost by accident. So I'm feeling overconfident, I think, is the headline here, and I'm probably going to fail this time.
Well, we're about to find out. Okay, are you ready for this?
Ready, sir.
Okay, there are, oh my goodness, there are something like 20 emojis,
Okay.
but they're often repeated.
Okay. All
Okay.
right. Oh,
So here
I'm
we
less
go.
ready for this. Okay, but go ahead.
So we have the world
Okay.
and the letter X. Not the letter X, sorry. It's a red X, so it's like a
Okay.
cross out. So
Yep.
world cross out.
Mm-hmm.
And that is repeated 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 times.
Okay.
So world X. Oh no, sorry. Oh no, that's right. 9 times. And then there is world check mark. Green check mark.
Ah. Okay. And that's it?
And that's it.
Okay. First guess has got to be the Stolen Earth.
I think it's not that.
You think it's not that?
I'm trying to find the answer key, and I don't know if I have it. Anyway, keep going. I don't.
My next guess would be World Enough in Time, but then it would probably have some sort of reference to time in it. And also, I think we may have done that one.
I
Are you without the answer card,
don't
sir?
think it is. I'm just trying to. I don't think it's that one.
Are we having a Warren Beatty moment?
Oh, this is bad. This is the Whomoji Challenge's Warren Beatty moment. But I do think I know this one.
Wait, it's La La Land. No. You think you know this one? Okay. So you think non-Stolen Earth?
It is. You know what? I think we're just gonna have to cut this Whomoji Challenge because I just realized I never got that.
You never got the answer. Oh,
I
boy.
never got the answer. We can keep going though. We can figure it out. Okay.
Yeah, we'll do it live.
Actually, now a contestant. Now that I just realized this on this one, I
boy.
think it's New Earth,
New Earth. Okay.
or
But
it's
then-
either New Earth or the end of the world.
Okay. End of the world could be. And then there's New Earth after that. Yeah. There are many options here. I like this this interpretive Whomoji challenge
Yeah.
that we've got going on. I was thinking, aren't there 9 planets stolen in the Stolen Earth?
No, it's more than that. It's like 27.
Oh, okay. All right.
It's in the high 20s. Anyway. Yeah.
All right. Well, there we go. Inconclusive Whomoji challenge. I don't know what else could it be. What other Earth titles are there? In
Well, there's
Doctor
world
Who's?
and Earth, right? And I think here's my reasoning on New Earth, because at some point the Doctor says it's actually new.
Okay.
And
I like it.
and end of the world. Actually, it doesn't quite fit end of the world, does it? Now that I think about it, because it's like, why wouldn't it just be one time?
Right.
Why are there 9?
Yeah.
So
All of this has
all
happened
right.
before.
So we'll come back. This was actually came to us from Mark. It's the one he left us, and I probably should have checked on what the story is. Now that
Hey, folks, we are doing it live. We're doing it live here in Pulled
That's what
Open.
totally. So anyway, go ahead and write in, folks, on what you think this was, and maybe we'll do some creative editing to get the answer.
Or maybe we'll just leave this in.
Leave it in.
People
Why
can
not?
listen to us flounder. It's fabulous. Because
Is best.
that's what we do here on Pull to Open. We do it live. But also something else that we do is we do polls on Spotify. Pete, what are we
we do.
looking at this week?
Okay, we do have results of this.
Yes.
So, yes. So remember, folks, if you are listening on Spotify, you can, of course, rate not only this podcast, but you can give your own rating for the story we're about to talk about. Or
That's
really
right.
any of the stories we've talked about. So we keep these polls open. So we, as everyone knows, we rate every single Doctor Who story with our unique rating system. And there's 6 ratings in it. And we put the question to the listeners every week, what would you rate the episode based on our rating system? And we have results from Kerblam. And, sir, I will cede the victory to you here because the rating that you gave it, which is a Professor Hater, which is a Doctor Who episode, maybe not great, but at least they tried something, is the clear winner here with 39% of the vote.
That's right. I mean, the Dalek and the Ogron could still form an alliance, as they have done in the past, and edge out Professor Hater. But yeah, I'm also glad to see an 11% showing for Lady Cassandra. Right. Which is certainly was in my head of something we might want to rate Kerblam. Very pretty paper-thin plot. You liked it. You rated it a Dalek, and 28% of people agree with you, which is
a decent showing.
Yeah, it's a decent showing. It's higher than I would have expected. But I'm glad that more people were positive and went for the Professor Hater option rather than the Ogron. And if you don't understand any of those ratings, we'll discuss it at the end of the show, by the way. Yeah, no Viscount bangers.
No bangers. No one thought it was one of the best of the best. Okay.
They can't all be bangers. They can't all be fixed points in time, which also rated 0%. This
tracks with like a lot of the discussion on social media around it too, on YouTube and on TikTok, where we're sharing a bunch of videos. A lot of folks shared your point of view that it's like, oh, they kind of tried something, but there was a lot of the what I sort of identified as the Rorschach test of Kerblam, where if your politics didn't align with it, you didn't like it. And I think there was a lot of vocal people who were in that camp.
Right. And also there were politics that could align with both sides, right? Given the reveal at the end that it's not actually a story about capitalism so much as it's a story about terrorism. So that's sort of opens it, I guess, to more perspectives. I really would like to see the show revisit Kerblam. I think it was a great idea. I don't think it was executed well in this format, but I feel like it's, we need to talk about Amazon in science fiction. We need to deal with this incredible science fiction company that governs our lives, provides stuff. Like literally, I was just coming back for this podcast. There's an Amazon box outside my door. The Kerblam man had been here. Like, yeah, let's go back. Let's find out. There's so much more to find out about the company. Who founded it? What is its place in the galactic economy?
They should do a sequel where Kerblam it isn't just a retailer, but they provide the underlying structure of the galactic interwebs in whatever the Kerblam era is.
Yeah, Kerblam Web Services.
That's their main business.
Kerblam Web Services, and then or Kerblam Sub Ethernet Services, and then everything just goes down one day.
Yeah.
Nobody can communicate. Love it. Okay, RTD, call us.
As always.
And RTD, don't be too afraid to revisit stuff from the Chibnall era. I know you might want to put a bit of distance, but, this is it's a fine place that you could start to revisit some of this stuff. Anyway,
don't be afraid to comment on YouTube, RTD.
Yes, we are also on YouTube. It's a good place to leave an emoji title and maybe also DM Pete the answer key. And you could see us on YouTube. You can see all of our Easter eggs in the background. You can see, Pete, what's your poster today? Is it a Pertwee?
It's a Pertwee.
It's a Pertwee, and you've got a Dalek.
From season 7.
Hey.
Yeah.
Nice one.
It's Inferno.
Indeed.
Not quite where we're headed today, but pretty close. Also a 7-parter.
So, oh God. Yes.
Sorry, I didn't mean to give you some relapse trauma there. I should give you a trigger warning.
Trigger warning. I'm going to say the word 7-parter. Oh, God, we just watched 7 parts of Ambassadors of Death this week. Anyway, if you are watching on YouTube, please like the video, subscribe, smash that bell icon for notifications from the Ambassadors of Death, or for whenever we post something new. And Pete, where else can the good listeners find us?
Good listeners can find us on TikTok at Pull to Open, also on Blue Sky, that same handle, Pull to Open, all one word. We're on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and kind of some of the time on Threads, Pull to Open 63. Now we check it all, guys. Go ahead and drop us a line on any of those places. Leave us a Whomoji title.
Yeah.
Or, let's just chat about things like maybe something that for us has just dropped about 24 hours ago.
Yep.
But for everyone else, this is going to be about a week old, but I think everyone will still be talking about it. So I think it's totally fine for us to spew out as many thoughts as we possibly can in rapid fire fashion about the new trailer.
All right. Should we give ourselves like a couple of minutes to talk about this? Stop the clock.
it's a trailer, so I don't think we want to go too far into any tangents. But
well, it's
why
not
don't
just
we
the trailer.
Yeah,
It's also confirmation from the BBC that Neil Patrick Harris is playing the Toymaker.
that's
Note,
correct.
not the Celestial Toymaker, because as we discovered at the beginning of this year when we did the Celestial Toymaker, Celestial can also be has been used as a vaguely racist word in the past. So they've removed that, and he is now just the Toymaker,
Well, we'll
which
see,
is fine.
right? I think RTD is self-referential enough that there's going to be some kind of bit where they're like, well, what's your first name? Don't really have one, you know? It's like, well, I thought they used to call you. No, we don't.
No, we don't say that anymore. Don't say the name. I'm just the Toymaker. I got to say, my favorite shot though of the whole thing, haven't seen it much talked about, is Neil Patrick Harris with the literally pulling the strings as the puppeteer of what we don't know, but.
A bit on the nose, but also so fun. Like the image is just
cool.
Incredible.
Yeah, and that's what trailers are about this stage, is giving us those images. And also, like, I thought it was really clever that we just sort of dropped the pretense of like, oh, will the Doctor, get through Donna's defenses, like, or Donna's mother's defenses in terms of being able to interact with her. Of course he is. Of course that was always going to happen. Like the previous trailer sort of had this notion of like, reminding us that her brain is supposed to explode if he's in her presence, right?
Well, and it's like that and the Toymaker reveal are both, we know. Like,
we just know.
This is going to happen. So this is like why I think the whole Toymaker thing in revealing it, I think it's the right call to do it so that, because we've all already figured it out. And I like that it's just dropping any pretense. Like, this isn't going to be the big reveal. Certainly not for the hardcore fans. So, we're just going to tell you right now, and then you don't have that in your head as you're waiting for it, right?
Right.
So
exactly. RTD's good at that. He gets on the level. He understands where the fandom is at. He's not going to J.J. Abrams this. If you remember J.J. Abrams, his Star Trek Into Darkness, where he was trying to deny up until the last minute that Benedict Cumberbatch was Khan. And that really broke trust with the fans, I think. RTD isn't doing that. And he's also giving us new information. One thing being here that the TARDIS was running away, or at least so says the 14th Doctor.
Right. So here's I'm going to throw some supposition out here. And I think that this is a bit of a mislead. So we're going to think like, oh, this is the Toymaker is such a threat that TARDIS ran away. But here's my guess. Because also they showed, of course, Ncuti Gatwa in the final seconds. And he wasn't saying, what the hell is going on here? He was basically just looking cool, as like he's freshly regenerated almost, because they even have this sort of audio sting of regeneration there. So my suspicion, and I've suspected this all along, I don't know how he's going to do it, but I don't think we're going to have to wait all the way to the final moments of the final special to finally see Ncuti Gatwa. I think he's going to get timey-wimey with it. And I think we might, and I think there's going to be a great reveal of some kind of scene, but I suspect the TARDIS has gone to get him. You know, he's basically gone forward in time to get the 15th Doctor help defeat the Toymaker.
I love that idea. Yeah. I love the idea that we have potentially a multi-Doctor story with a Doctor from the future for the first time, if you don't count the appearance of Peter Capaldi's eyebrows in the 50th. But like similar idea to that, but spinning it forward, doing it better, doing it more. Like, of course, why wouldn't there be Doctors from the future helping out in any situation? And to get to see that from the other end, to sort of, as it were, be Patrick Troughton encountering John Pertwee, but during Patrick Troughton's run. I mean, how cool would have that have been?
It's definitely risky, right? Because fans aren't used to this. The regeneration is the reveal, right? And to sort of just subvert that, I think it's, maybe he does it, maybe he doesn't. But the idea that like there'll still be some kind of reveal. It's still going to be super dramatic, but even more unexpected. And then you'll still have the regeneration.
Yes,
but it's just going to be played differently. So it's I think it's a great idea, even if he doesn't do it. Some future showrunner should do it, or he should do it for the next Doctor, because it's just a fun playing of the ingredients of how this is supposed to go.
It's so fantastic, especially if you use it as a cliffhanger. Like, the cliffhanger, say it's at the end of the Star Beast or whatever, they're in some kind of peril. And what's this? It's the TARDIS noise. Who steps out? It's Shooty. Insert sting, insert scream. Oh my God, what a cliffhanger. How are they going to explain that? And maybe you could have Tennant even saying, what? But of course, Tennant is used to fake next Doctor, so maybe the shtick will be that he doesn't believe that he's the next Doctor. It's like, I've been fooled once before on this. Are you sure you just haven't had cyber memories inserted in you? Sorry,
I love it.
For the next Doctor.
I got to say, it's the wonderful thing about trailers, and this trailer in particular, which was nice and long and beefy. It just gets your mind going. It gets you all like, oh, I'm excited, and I hope they do X or Y. But just the fact that you're just so excited for it. And well, part of it is like we're starved for content. We haven't done new Doctor Who since basically a year ago.
It's perfect. We got more Meep action. I love is it Miriam Margolyes doing the voice of the Meep? She's wonderful. Wonderful British actress. She's perfect for that role, especially as we know what we know about the Meep. But it's also nice that Unit features so heavily in that trailer, because here we are at a Unit story, and we could see how far Unit has come.
Well, like holy cow, are they just like getting all the Avengers base hand-me-downs? Because they had the helicarrier, now they have essentially Stark Tower.
Yes, but in London,
it's in London, but it just looks just like even with the helipad, which was sort of the Iron Man pad, I guess, in the Avengers movies. But it's nuts.
You just well, you know what you do when you have a floating HQ is you can just lift up buildings with it, and transport them. So obviously they bought Stark HQ in a fire sale at some point when Stark Industries is in big financial trouble. Just lifted it over to London and thought, this is a great inconspicuous place for a secret organization such as ours. The aliens will never find this.
Yeah. Well, I got to say, it looked incredible. I sat down with my whole family to watch the trailer. We all loved it, and it was just like it was like watching a trailer to any blockbuster movie you can think of, right? I mean, the helicopters. You have that neat little bit where Neil Patrick Harris is behind he's manning some kind of turret that is pointing at the Doctor, and
isn't that's a specific gun that we've already seen that Unit has, right?
Oh, is it? Oh, okay.
I think so. Yeah, I saw some Twitter chatter about that, but we'll get there when we get there.
But it just looks like set piece after set piece. It just looks incredible. So, again, I think something we mentioned once before. It looks like Tennant's finally getting the budget that his Doctor deserved, because famously it was not as well moneyed as the show is today. So, good stuff.
Indeed. Well, yes, from Unit story to Unit story, I think it's time. Go back in time to 1970, even though I'm going to run straight into the buzzsaw that we call TLDW.
Well, it's a slow-moving buzzsaw this time, so you'll have time to chop your binding and escape, I think, as long as you focus on the right things. Because holy cow, here it is, guys. TLDW, and it's one of our longest ones. Not the longest, but a longer
TLDW. Too long didn't watch Too Long Doctor Who, or Too Long don't watch. I would say, with 7 episodes, this is hella padded. So on the one hand, that's good for me. But on the other, there's still a lot that goes on, and stuff is very confusing.
There is a lot that goes on in the Ambassadors of Death, but we give only 30 seconds per classic series episode. But in this case, that adds up to an entire 3.5 minutes. So you got room to stretch.
Yep.
All right. Use it wisely. Are you ready, sir?
I'm stretching. Okay. I think the entire story has just fled from my head, so it's going to be very interesting to see what happens, how badly I retell this. But let's see.
Just think of basements and rooms with windows, and you'll be fine. Okay.
Okay.
It's the official pull to open summary of the Ambassadors of Death in 3, 2, 1, go.
Okay, so there's a British space mission to Mars Probe 7, and but they've lost contact with it. What's going on? They've got a Recovery 7 thing up there, and there's a guy, and he sort of doesn't know what he's found, and there's weird stuff going on. But we go back to HQ, and UNIT is there. They're trying to help figure out what's going on with this missing Mars probe, and Recovery 7 lands, and the astronauts get taken somewhere else. I think, but then the probe itself is empty. But meanwhile, the Doctor's been watching this all on television. He has got the TARDIS console with Liz Shaw, and he's experimenting with it. He's sending both of them forward in time, but then he gets involved. He starts to watch the TV coverage of this Mars probe mission, and gets straight down to Space Center sharpish because they need his help, because there's a mysterious message or noise that's being played, and it kind of briefly kind of blows everyone's minds, and the Doctor needs to get up there. He decides he's going to be the pilot on the next mission. Meanwhile, Liz stays on Earth, and Liz and the Doctor are sort of running around uncovering this conspiracy. They're talking to the Minister of Technology, who appears to be trying to slow walk everything. There's a guy called General Carrington who's in charge of space security, and he starts to get a bit bloodthirsty because turns out that there's an alien ship in the sky, and that's where the Doctor goes. And meanwhile, there are these astronauts at this secure facility, and these criminals are involved in this conspiracy with the scientists. Everyone's in this conspiracy, and they've got these guys in spacesuits, and they've got tons of radiation on them, and they're used to go around and kill people, including the minister, and that's to scare everyone, because guess what? General Carrington is the sort of head of all this conspiracy, and when the Doctor goes up into space, he finds that the astronauts are fine. They're on this alien vessel that looks a bit weird. Everything goes a bit trippy, and he's inside. And they think they're watching football, and that they're fine. They're back at Space Center, but they're not. They're up in the ship. They're just watching weird stuff. And anyway, he discovers that basically the astronauts down there, the scary things, are actually ambassadors that have been sent to Earth. But General Carrington doesn't want them to be ambassadors. He wants to blow the alien ship out of the sky with nuclear weapons. And because it turns out that they killed his friend Jim on Mars, because he was a Mars astronaut himself. Been all sorts of Mars missions in the background of this. And yeah, so he tries to do a TV broadcast to the entire world, but the Doctor and Liz and the Brigadier and Bessie, they all and the unit soldiers, they all come in using the ambassadors to break into Space Center in the TV studio, and General Carrington is placed under arrest by the Brigadier, who Carrington had previously tried to arrest. He tried to basically supersede all of UNIT, but he didn't, and the Brig is there, and Benton takes General Carrington away, and they're all left. UNIT is left to do, and the Space Center is left to do the swapsies of the ambassadors and the actual astronauts who are still up there, and we don't see them. And time to do a sting. Okay, what I gotta have missed out some things. I'm sorry, I gave Liz short shrift. The name of the scientist who tries to blow up the Doctor with the big beard and the Swiss accent completely escaped me. Italian. Yeah, he sounds like he should have been in the Aztecs.
Yeah. So anyway, that good job. You that was a bunch of things that happened in the ambassador,
but not necessarily in the right order.
No, I think you got a lot of the plot elements and essential characters, and I think if there was probably not quite enough sort of stringing it all together, right? Yeah. That like one thing leading to another.
The conspiracy is very confusing on this one.
Yes, it is.
I mean, because it's
moments where you're really unsure of like who's doing what and why, and who's died and who's double crossing who. And I unfortunately, that is a bit of a slam on the script, and maybe even Doctor Who of the era, which is if I was watching something along the lines of, I don't know, a heist movie or a Guy Ritchie type thing or whatever, like, these kind of like twisty turny things where you're coming in the middle of the story and you're confused, but you're confident it's going to come together, that the storytelling, you're supposed to be confused, but they're telling the story in such a way that it's all going to make sense. That doesn't really happen here.
Yeah. The focus is all over the place.
Exactly.
It should have been on Carrington all along. This is why I kind of dwelled on Carrington, is that he really is the villain of the piece. And he's a fascinating villain because he believes that he is acting with honor. He believes that it is very necessary to blow up this alien spacecraft with nuclear weapons. He actually reminded me a lot of General Ripper in Dr. Strangelove. Like, this his genuine belief that the Soviets are infecting precious bodily fluids. That's why he initiates nuclear war. I mean, that's basically kind of what Carrington is trying to do here, is initiate an interstellar nuclear war by attacking this ship, all because they killed his buddy, and you sort of feel for him at the end.
Yeah, I mean,
I just wish we'd had more of him.
Well, that's honestly, like I said, I don't want to slam Ambassadors too much because I think you're dead on in that the plot and the overall thing he's trying to do, I get it. Like, okay, I wasn't, you're not entirely sure, say, when Regan's burying the people in gravel, like what's going on there.
Yeah, so Regan is the thug in all this,
right?
Yeah,
I got a little short shrift, I think, in your summary.
Oh yeah, barely in it.
Yeah.
Also, short shrift for Lennox, who is a sad scientist who's given himself over to the bad guys and has ethical quandaries about it.
Yeah, let's be real. There's probably like 2 or 3 extra characters here that don't really need to be in it because there's 2 or 3 extra episodes here that don't really need to be in it. And it's a very padded story. It doesn't have enough story and enough intrigue to keep you going for 7 episodes. Disclosure, I watched this with my daughter, but she pieced out after 3 episodes. Basically,
I can believe it.
Like, I told her,
I nearly pieced out after 3 episodes, and I have to watch this thing.
Yeah, great. I told her, Grace, we got like 2 hours of Doctor Who still to watch of that Ambassador. Her face just kind of fell like it was homework, and I was like, I'm not going to do this too.
Did it like zoom in on her face and you heard the sting, you heard the scream?
Pretty much silent scream that you gave me. But like, let's take a step back on Ambassadors of Death, because I think it's there's some interesting notable firsts here, and the one that I would say is the most notable is that this to me anyway is the very first very clear example of Doctor Who as James Bond. Now we've seen that a little bit in Spearhead from Space, not so much in the Silurians, which was just previous to this. But this is full on, right? This is a very Earth-based conspiracy. It's got a human mastermind. There are car chases, foot chases, gun battles galore, and sort of a big climax that's being broadcast worldwide. I mean, this is James Bond level stuff.
And it's not entirely Pertwee era. It's not entirely new to Doctor Who because so the writer, ostensibly the writer is David Whittaker, and he's sort of basically he did the outline. Malcolm Hulke comes along and fixes, writes the last few episodes from the outline. But he also wrote, he was a very prolific Doctor Who writer. This is sadly his last story. But he also wrote The Enemy of the World, which had a bit of a Bondness to it. And this is sort of feels like it's building on that. But it also feels like, and it's partly the problem of like not having Whittaker stick around and finish his original idea. It does have it's a bit schizophrenic in terms of what it wants to be. Like, is this a conspiracy of thugs or scientists or generals, or like everyone's mixed up in this, and you don't have what we had in Meglos last week of this very clear delineation between, the science side and the, shall we say, fear-based religion side, which is sort of the equivalent of let's just blow this thing out of the sky. They're all dangerous. The xenophobia aspect, which kind of goes hand in hand often with organized groups like organized religion. Not all organized religions, of course, but
you basically have UNIT versus everybody else.
Yeah,
and even at the end, when UNIT is back in control and they arrest Carrington, you don't get the sense of like, well, who's even the higher authority here? Like, can't Carrington just radio in even more army guys and retake over? You know what I mean? Like, who's really in charge? And he just kind of gives up because the story's already gone on for 7 episodes and it has to end. And he kind of just walks away and like goes, "Cuff 'em, boys," and out he goes.
Yeah.
But again, like I think you're dead on in that there's no clear like here are the lines of this thing, and not just the lines of who's who, but like I think you're getting at the ideological lines.
Yeah,
like,
and also how can Carrington arrest the Brigadier? Doesn't somebody try to do that in another unit story that we've visited? And Brigadier's like, "Oh no, actually, I'm not under your authority." You know, I report to the United Nations. Like, so a British Army officer cannot, even a general cannot arrest me. So it's feels a little inconsistent along those lines.
Yeah, I think, and I wish they had known more about their own storylines and been consistent. Even if, like, I think it's okay for Carrington to go outside the law because that's what he's clearly doing here. So I'm going to arrest you, even though you assert you can't. I can't do that, Brigadier. But it would have been good to sort of say that, right?
Yeah.
Like, in other words, the Brigadier brings up his own authority, and then Carrington just ignores it.
Yeah.
So that would have been fine.
I was going to say, we don't want to sound like that we're being a bit too down on it. Like, yes, there is a slump in the middle of the Ambassadors of Death, but I feel like it really pulls itself out once the Doctor arrives at the alien spacecraft. First of all, it like gets a bit kind of trippy in 2001 at that point, and the Doctor appears to be looking at, well, let's just say it's a giant Sarlacc pit in the sky, and we all know what the Sarlacc pit has been said to represent. It kind of looks like that too. It's you definitely change the shape of that alien ship if you were doing it today, I think. But like, he gets on there, he finds the astronauts, and they think they're watching TV. Like that the reason that stuck out in my recap, because that was when I sat up and started paying attention to the Ambassadors of Death. And also, up until that point, I was like, who are the ambassadors? Like, is this going to go through the whole thing? Because you don't realize it till the very end, almost, that the ambassadors are inside these astronaut suits. Well,
the Doctor says so.
Yeah.
At some point,
At some
I think
point,
it's pretty clear they're aliens. And he basically, because I like that line from Pertwee somewhere toward the middle. He says, "I know where your astronauts are." Great. Where are they? Still in orbit. They never came down. I don't know what came down, but it wasn't them.
Yeah, he does it. That's the thing. Nobody knows that these are ambassadors. They're just, as far as we know, like controllable spacesuits acting like robots. Right. So
and emitting massive levels of radiation.
Yes.
I don't know. I think it was pretty obvious that they were aliens. I don't think I had to wait till Liz Shaw, one of them randomly pulls off their helmet just to show Liz's real face.
Yeah, and that is where it gets really good as well, because that's a good mask.
Yeah.
It's maybe one of the scariest, low-key scariest villains in Doctor Who, because, and there may be a reason why this notion of like scary astronaut had been repeated in New Who, in Silence of the Library. Hey, who turned out the lights? That has very, very Ambassadors of Death vibes. And so does the Impossible Astronaut. And by the way, I feel we're going to get to this with why the randomizer brought us here, but I feel that I must apologize. I said that I was only going to watch Doctor Who that the randomizer sent us to. And that was a way of controlling my Doctor Who watching.
Right.
I did, however, recently watch with a friend, because I randomly thought that, season 6 of the new show would be a good way to get a friend on board. So I watched The Impossible Astronaut with them. And and I feel like this is the randomizer finding me out, being like, okay, I'm going to insert the original Impossible Astronaut here. You're welcome. And I'm like, oh, God. It's been paying attention. It sees me when I'm sleeping. It sees me when I'm watching Doctor Who that it didn't recommend. I'm sorry, randomizer. But yeah, it's an iconic image.
Your penance is watching every episode of season 7 now.
Oh God. Oh yeah, we should mention how close we are to a season 7 bingo, and we we will, when we achieve the season 7 bingo, we will also achieve a Doctor Who in the title bingo.
That's right.
Because of course it is Doctor Who and the Silurians. I'm kind of glad the randomizer did it this way around, because I don't think I would want to watch Ambassadors of Death as my last season 7.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah.
So, but I do think you're right. We've been a little hard on Ambassadors because I do think what you said. It sort of slumps in the middle. You're right. It gets going again at the end, but it also, I think, starts off pretty strong. So I really like the first. It's not. I guess it's a cold open, but just the line "something took off from Mars." Like they really. It seems like whoever wrote it, whether it's David Whitaker or whomever, really thought about like how do we tease this and really get people to sort of come back. Not that it's that long after
Right.
the sting comes up, but it was like, oh, that line, that's a good line. And, you think about this again, the whole background of it. And you kind of have to put yourself in where the public was in 1970. So this started broadcast in March 1970. So the moon landings had just happened. Apollo 11 and Apollo 12 had happened. And they're weeks away, literally weeks, just a few weeks away when it starts from Apollo 13, which goes up.
Which happens
April
during Ambassadors of Death. Yeah.
It's actually, there is I think it's episode, is it 4 that comes out during, like, basically that is the launch of Apollo 13. That's right. Part 4 was broadcast April 11th, the same day Apollo 13 launched. And perhaps not coincidentally, it is the highest rated episode of the serial. It is a 9.3 rating. But
my goodness.
Everyone knows what happened with Apollo 13. Go watch the movie if you don't. I won't spoil it, but basically all of that got resolved within a week. And you would think maybe because of all the interest in Apollo 13, the ratings would have stayed good or high for this serial. They did not. Interest really dropped off to the point where the last episode 7, only had a 5.4 rating, which is the lowest of this entire season.
Wow. And may have been one of the reasons why it was threatened with cancellation after Inferno. Interesting.
Maybe.
Yeah. You got to wonder whether kind of, first of all, did Doctor Who or did the Doctor kind of bring about the Apollo 13 catastrophe just to promote his show? That's an interesting theory. I'm not going to say that I believe in that theory. I'm just asking questions. And I know that YouTube is not going to ban us for bringing up the conspiracy theory. And, honestly, folks, it's time for a new Apollo program conspiracy theory. This whole didn't land on the moon. It's been done. Doctor Who engineered the Apollo 13 disaster to promote the Ambassadors of Death. I'm saying that right here, right now. You can try to cancel me, but that's, wake up, sheeple. But you got to figure that afterwards, after Apollo 13, people were a bit like, well, this is not funny. Like those astronauts nearly died. Like it's a bit too close to the bone, right? Might have had that sense.
No, that's fair. You almost think like that would be sort of the call today, right? Again, it was all resolved within a week. So, this sort of too soon. And, I think I could swallow the Apollo 13. Now that turned out they were all fine and they did the splashdown. But so,
if they hadn't been, this would have been yanked from the air. I mean, and maybe not even finished if they hadn't survived. So thank you, Jim Lovell and everyone aboard Apollo 13 for actually surviving.
All the people in Houston who were hard to make sure that came down. Hey, didn't you see the movie? Ed Harris.
Ed Harris did it, and he did it because he got a new waistcoat from his wife. I remember. And they dumped out a bunch of stuff on her desk, and they figured out how to do it with cardboard and bits of string. And such a good movie.
But it gives you, like, again, some background as to some of the storyline, not just the storyline, but some of the choices they made with respect to showing Unit of the near future. So this is so clear. Like, there's always the debate on Unit dating. This is a story that I think very strongly is in the camp of Unit's the near future, because it's a Mars mission, and not the first one. And, there's all these sort of advanced things that space travel, even at the time, didn't do. So, for example, the rocket lands on land. Like it doesn't splash down, which is like, holy cow, that's like SpaceX level
I know.
technology, like 50 years early. So there's that.
At least in the capsule, yeah, it's fascinating, and it's sort of set in this weird, alternate universe where Britain is a leader in space, and all NASA gets to do in this story is send up an unmanned probe. Like,
Poor NASA.
Poor NASA. Like, NASA is
all
so
their money on
timid.
the moon.
I know.
Get to
And now
Mars.
they're just like, oh, hey, maybe we should go check out this alien spacecraft. Well, let's send up an unmanned probe. Whereas, of course, we know here in America, we know there would be this muscular response, and Nixon probably would have nuked it before General Carrington had even had the idea.
I mean, it's the James Bond response. You send up a space shuttle full of astronauts with laser guns to whatever the problem is. They have those at the ready. They just boom.
Yes. The Armageddon response. Yes, it's a few decades too early for Bruce Willis, but yeah, you could assemble. I don't know who would be in the equivalent of the Armageddon team in 1970
of Moonraker, because that's what happens. It's like
yes.
the satellite's revealed, and then it's just the U.S. can just casually send up a space shuttle immediately with a bunch of laser gun toting, gringos. It's all
that's what they do. Yeah, I kind of see Lee Marvin in this kind of a Dirty Dozen kind of flick in space.
But yeah, there's other stuff too. So that show it's future-y. So the astronauts' spacesuits are very slim relatively to what spacesuits were at the time. They talk about decontamination only taking a couple hours or an hour when it was about 2 days.
Can I get one thing off my back about those spacesuits? They're beige.
Yeah.
Like the color is so horribly 1970 of those spacesuits, and it makes them look old. It makes them look like they were white, but they faded, and they're 70 years old at this point. That's such a bad idea.
They had to fit in with the unit guys. Everyone's wearing beige.
Well, I was going to say, meanwhile, Unit has this is the only story where Unit has bright white uniforms, like Benton is wearing, right? And Benton, by the way, we can't go too far without talking about Sergeant Benton, was Corporal, now Sergeant. This is his return. John Levine, looking kind of David Bowie-like. He's so young and handsome, and in that nice white suit, he really looks so otherworldly. And I really think Ambassadors of Death missed a trick by not sending him up, because Pertwee, let's be frank, he looks ridiculous. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
In the spacesuit, especially with the thing pulled over his head. Like he just has on for no reason, and it just doesn't work with his hair.
The guy in Meglos, Zaster with his little Red Riding Hood cap, There's a
he looks a bit like that, and he does, and of course, he does some gurning when there's the G-forces are hitting his face. He does some Pertwee facial, which some fans have apparently seen that and thought, oh, well, that looks very no, it's not gurning, it's real. These are the G-forces. No, it just looks like Pertwee gurning, and we've seen that. So maybe get someone else in. Maybe get Benton. He'd be a perfect astronaut.
I will say it's not as bad as other Pertwee gurning goofball moments in Terror of the Autons that we've seen. So I barely noticed it. But yeah, you're keen on something that I again, another criticism of the serial is that it's just not really that visually interesting. You even the stuff when you get to the alien ship, which I think is probably as interesting as it gets, as rude as the design of the ship might be. You get sort of one shot of what I guess is supposedly the landing bay where he's come to the light, and were you reminded of the mutants, by the way, in that moment?
Yes.
That was a little bit.
Oh, trippy mutants colors, yes. Yeah. We're back in the disco cave.
And then again, he's in the the airport lounge with the guys watching the imaginary soccer game. So then that's really that's all you really see of the alien ship and the alien, the interior or the exterior. And then sort of you have the alien guy behind the screen. I don't know why it has to be behind the screen, but I guess you could argue the radioactivity or whatever. it's not. You think about like the great visuals of this era, whether it's the Axons or the Autons and their plastic heads, right? Those giant heads that they had on. Like they're not. This is one of the least interesting visually episodes of this era, and it's too bad. It just makes it really kind of unmemorable because there are good parts of it. Like I say, the James Bond plot's good. It gets you going and thinking about conspiracies. There's some gun battles, even though there's too much of all this and it gets a little tiresome because of all the padding. Nothing really sort of stands out that well.
Yeah, there is a great fight scene in episode 1 that is much praised when they trace the location of the signal to London, which is another hilariously British-centric moment. Triangulate the signal. It's in London. It's in a warehouse in London where we can have a gun battle. The brigadier,
super close.
Yes, the brigadier kills people in this. Like
Totally.
There's that guy who he shoots at point blank range and throws down the stairs, basically.
Remember Battlefield? His hands were drenched in blood. That's what Morgan said.
Yeah, well, now we get to see the blood. I mean, we've there's a bit of a spoiler here for the end of Doctor Who and the Silurians. The Doctor's still mad at UNIT for whatever happened there. We won't talk about it till we get there. But yeah, it's kind of interesting. It's also interesting that we see the console out of the TARDIS the first time. We forgot that when we were talking about Inferno. I think we were wondering whether that was the first time the console was out of the TARDIS.
Yeah, well, we could talk about that for a second. No, this is the first time we see it out. When it's actually kind of confusing, I think, if you think about it, because my daughter, she was still watching with me at this point, thought they were in the TARDIS because there's the console. It's like, okay, like, well, what did they do to the console room? They put a TV in there or whatever. And I mean, I think you can kind of figure it out pretty quickly, but that's a little weird. But then the whole scene obviously is to tease the going forward in time. And, it's like, oh, you're still watching Doctor Who and sci-fi stuff happens. But that seemingly teases when he hides I forget what it is. It's like the thing from Titanium.
It's a tape. It's a tape.
Yeah, the data or whatever from it's the transmission.
Right.
Yeah. Or whatever they translated.
And Titanium, the scientist with the big beard, is trying to get hold of it, and the Doctor literally makes it disappear, and it's one of the worst. It's inexcusable. Like, because he says he's not sending it forward in time.
Yeah.
There's some other technobabble reason for why he's made it disappear.
It's transmigration of object, which seems like that's Time Lord Sleight of Hand or something, but it conveniently never uses it again. I mean, okay, fair enough. It's like Ian's thumb trick with on Ixta and the Aztecs. Just one time, you get to do it one time. That's it.
It's like the bee sting of Time Lords. They just get to use it once. You just get to transmigrate an object one time in your entire lifetime, and he uses it up in his third incarnation. Good going, Doctor. I'm sure there were many other examples when you could have used that.
So getting back to UNIT, I got to say, I don't think they're well served in this episode, just because even though they get into a bunch of gun battles, they tend to lose a bunch of them, or whether it's a gun battle or whatever. So UNIT is shown to be kind of like they're in charge of security at the Space Center, it looks like. Yeah. And they're complete boobs. Like Regan, the bad guy, breaks in, by my count, like 3 times to essentially do something that completely pulls the wool over their eyes. So the first time it's off screen, it's like when he first gets the ambassadors, the aliens.
Yes.
As there's this whole gun battle and helicopter and all this stuff where they almost get them, but they don't. And then they bring them back to Space Center. And then we're told, oh, some guys just came in and said they were official people and they took the ambassadors, or they took the ambassadors.
My goodness, we really need a security review of this place. And no wonder General Carrington's pissed at UNIT.
Well, exactly. He's right to replace the UNIT soldiers, because not only did they do that, like there's the whole thing with the gas that he gasses the Doctor when he kidnaps him on the way back. Oh, and he earlier than that, he screwed up the fuel. And he breaks in every single time in some, like, he's got the bakery truck or whatever it is.
Yeah,
and it's
the bakery truck. I love that. You just drive into Johnson Space Center or whatever with a
because they
bakery
need
truck.
their freaking donuts and biscuits or whatever.
Exactly,
It's
come
like, oh yeah,
on.
the biscuit truck. Yeah, like, are you gonna look in the truck? Are you, because he's got a big nozzle there, and it's like there's no donuts in the truck. It's
And isn't it funny how industrial and how much like a natural gas facility the space center looks? I mean, this is, you can kind of look at this as practice for Inferno, right? Like, which is much better use of an industrial facility that they can run around with lots of gantries and all that good stuff. This does not work so well
yeah.
as the National Space Center.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, is such a British concept. First of all, calling it, it's the National Space Center, it's the British Space Center. Which don't we see the Space Museum? That's right, in Terror of the Autons,
Right.
but the Space Center doesn't really show up again, or does it?
The Space Museum was, I think, something else. There's but I think there was some kind of space discovery museum.
Right, yes, the British Space Museum in Terror of the Autons.
But yeah, it speaks to sort of some of the lazy writing here, and Regan, like, they just can't figure out some other thing to do. But like, they should have at least made some self-referential line of like, I can't believe he broke it again. Oh my god, like, it's because we can't believe it. And
right.
There's the bit where it's like, oh, we need more radioactive isotopes. Let's just go break into the local isotope factory. Like, you literally say that. Like, a local isotope factory was raided, because those exist, and they're all over the place here in the near future. You got to go, like, it's the line from Back to the Future, right? Like, I'm sure plutonium's available in every corner drugstore in 1985.
Well, it also reminded me of the line from Oppenheimer. If you've seen that, there's a big thing made of Oppenheimer saying that isotopes are not that dangerous, or that, like, they're slightly more dangerous than a sandwich. Which gets a laugh and creates his enemy and all of that stuff. But yeah, it did feel a bit
speaking of
like
isotopes as a sandwich, I mean, that's how they off Lennox about halfway through. And did you find it like weird? Like, hold on a second, someone walked in who looked like they weren't wearing a hazmat suit and put down this thing, and then he pulls it off, and he doesn't think to put the thing back on again. Like, that might help. I mean, maybe it's not lead line, fair enough, or whatever. But what are you doing? Like, wouldn't you put it on the other side of the room, as far away from you as possible? Like, kick it over there, and then just cover it with as much crap as you can.
And who does that? Like, is there some confusion over who killed Lennox?
I think it's a good question. Was it because did Regan just do it? Yeah, he must have, because they talk about it later, because they realize that he's
I killed him.
I think they get Liz to tell them that, like, Lennox is now confessing to them, so Regan has to go. I mean, this is the thing. I do like Regan. Regan's a good, effective thug/villain who clearly has his own designs to use the ambassadors for his own personal gain. I like that. You get to know this guy, what he's about, and I respect bad guys who get their hands dirty, who just like, okay, we need to go kill this guy. I'm going to go kill this guy. We need to go get the doctor blown up in the spacecraft. I'm going to just break in there and screw up the fuel. Like, he's just totally hands-on, completely.
He's kind of like the one guy who is trying to turn Ambassadors of Death into a heist movie. Right. He's like, come on, I'm out here on my own, like, doing clever things with a bakery van. Like, and he's plotting bank robberies at some point. Like, he's like,
as a partner.
Can I get anyone interested in this? You want to get in on this action? It's like Ocean's 1. He wants to make it Ocean's 2.
He offers the job to Liz, and it's not like she's tempted or anything, but he's like, you're I like you in those boots. I mean, I'm sure you won't betray me at your first possible opportunity. So let's work together here.
Speaking of Liz, was this a good story for Caroline, John? I mean, she's working.
I think it's a great story for her fashion sense. I think she looks fabulous. She slays in all of her outfits. Those white boots are amazing.
Yes, queen.
She has some good. She has some great midi skirts, some great coats that go with them. And I gotta say, like, her ability to hold her hat on when she's being flipped over the railing over whatever that was, that river, or that dam, or it's
The
impressive.
weir. I believe it's a weir.
A weir.
They couldn't even get a dam. All they've got is a weir.
Although I
It's
should
very
really
British.
compliment her stunt double for that. But still,
Yeah.
Liz, way to go.
Yeah, so she's wearing a wig for some of it because apparently her own hair would get too frizzy. So that's a little weird. And she's sort of kind of a weird mix of Liz Shaw and Joe Grant at this stage, because she is sort of there are a few moments where she's kind of the helpless dolly bird that are a bit unfortunate, and like, you know, she does get some great moments as well of like I think where she says to where Regan grabs her and she says, "Don't worry, I won't hurt you," which I believe is actually a Troughton line that gets repeated here. But it's great to hear her say that. But other than that, like, she's constantly being kidnapped,
Captured and recaptured.
Yeah, and the Doctor doesn't even let her in on his scheme at the end. She thinks that the Doctor is genuinely working with General Carrington. So, not a great one for Liz, and you can kind of see why she would want to quit the series after this.
Well, she didn't quit. I mean, when Caroline got on, she just wasn't asked back.
Yeah.
But she was also pregnant during this time. So it's funny, like, there's a lot of sort of background players and unit soldiers who are like who's who of Doctor Who, that guys. And one of them is Jeffrey Beavers.
Yes.
And he went on to play the Master in The Keeper of Traken, and he reprised that role in Big Finish a few times. So good for him. But he's obviously, as hardcore fans know, if you don't know, he's Caroline John's husband, but not yet when they were filming this. Although she was pregnant, I assume, with his child. At the time.
I don't know. Hey, wait a minute. Some timey-wiminess going on here.
But they got married a little bit after this in June. So congrats, belatedly.
Yeah. If nothing else, I'm glad that the randomizer sent us the Ambassadors of Death, because I would never have otherwise have learned that Liz Shaw married the Master. Right. There's some headcanon that emerges just from that statement, right? That's wonderful. And, you know, going straight from a Tom Baker and Lalla Ward story, a sad example of Doctor Who bringing couples together, to a positive one, you know, because they've had a long and happy marriage. Are they still together? Are they still both alive? I think they may be. But yeah, what a pairing.
Liz and Caroline and Jeffrey Beavers?
Yeah.
Oh, no, Caroline John, unfortunately, she passed away quite some time ago.
Okay.
Yeah. So she's no longer with us.
Jeffrey Beavers is that.
Yeah, Jeremy, but he's reprised his role as the Master in Big Finish here and there, and actually even filled in some continuity gaps of sort of what happens post Ainley in the series, and then kind of regresses. I don't want to spoil it for anyone, but there's an interesting Big Finish called Master. And there's another one, actually, it's not that one, that sort of fills in the gap. There's sort of a Seventh Doctor story where, anyway, I've said too much. The title of it doesn't come to mind, but I'll throw it in the show notes if I remember it. It's a really good sort of follow up on what the Master was up to, and he's sort of trying to do some stuff with some place the Daleks were supposed to be, et cetera, et cetera. It's really really interesting.
We got to get that list going of big finishes that we have discussed and recommended on Pull to Open, because I want to start listening to those for extra credit. Okay, I'm going to say two more things. And then I think it might be time to get to the questions. Just two.
Hey, I've got 10 more things.
Okay.
I don't. No. Let's each get two, though.
Okay, first of all, I will note that this Apollo 13 was not the only historical event going on simultaneously. Also, the Beatles were breaking up. And that's super weird, and I may mention that in Why Did the Randomizer Take 6. I've been listening to the Beatles recently. I and here they are, kind of not exactly showing up, but like this is what you would have used to soothe your sadness at the time of the Beatles breakup. You'd be like, well, at least Doctor Who is still on. You turn on, you watch Ambassadors of Death. Whoa, this is weird. And maybe this is signaling a whole new era of like glam rock and David Bowie. It's getting started. But the other thing I wanted to talk about is a character we haven't mentioned, but a character who maybe is the LVP, the least valued player, and is in it way too much. That's right. I'm talking about Control Room Assistant Number 2, played by Joanna Ross. You know who I'm talking about, Pete. There's a woman who just reads out stuff straight to camera, and it's sort of intercut with Cornish, who's the head of the Space Center.
Yeah.
Like, and she's just...
Yeah.
She looks like a newsreader to me. I don't know. What does she look like to you?
She looks a little like Petra in Inferno, I have to say. I think that's because the styles of the time were probably similar. It's not her. I could tell it wasn't her, but similar hair, similar intonation too, in that Petra is very kind of matter of fact and cerebral, and this is clearly what this role is sort of, they're just reading stuff.
Right, she's just reading. So it may be the editing that's badly, or maybe the direction that she wasn't told to say it with any. But like, it doesn't matter. Like, the Mars probe is about to blow up. The Mars probe shall blow up in 5 seconds. She's saying some stuff that could be heightening the drama. She could be using a heightened drama voice, but no, it's just sort of flat. And there's so much of it that it's practically one episode. And interesting thing here, I went back and looked at the Radio Times, the British listings magazine, which it lists the cast for every episode. In episode 6, all of a sudden, Joanna Ross, Control Room Assistant, is listed first in the cast, 2 places above Doctor Who John Pertwee. And I don't know why. I think maybe they switched to in order of appearance. But it really seems to dovetail the fact that she is in that episode way too much, and it almost feels like a nefarious, subtle meta plot by a background character to kind of take over the show and become the lead actor. It almost seems to be what's been happening here. Did that derail it much for you?
No, not at all.
Now?
No, I think there are simply too many characters here, and if they just deleted a bunch, I think they would have saved time and got this down to 4 episodes.
Yeah, it's really where it needs to be.
It's a 4-episoder.
We should talk one more thing before we get to the questions, which is the colorization of this, right? That's fairly recent.
Relatively, because I definitely remember seeing this one in black and white. So I obviously saw all the Pertwee episodes when I was watching them wasn't first run, but it was in PBS, but it was the dailies. So the dailies, after they finished Davison, which I started with, they actually went back to Pertwee, and I stuck with Pertwee for a while. And this and the Silurians were both black and white, and I believe they've both been colorized now, but this one took a while, because the color information they had was very incomplete. So
it was from a US broadcast, I believe.
Yeah, and I think I'm not 100% on this, but I do know that when they recorded episodes on the film, that there was a bit of the color information was there that they could then sort of use to backfill in, even though the film itself wasn't color. So I think with the combination of using the information as well as the colorized version from the States, which was low quality, they were able to colorize it in bits. So I think parts of it were done in the 2000s, and then they finished it up for the 2012 DVD release. And then, because I was actually a little bit surprised when I queued this up on BritBox, that it's like, oh, color, great.
Especially as the previews of each episode are just black and white shots. Oddly, again, continuing the weird thing that BritBox does with black and white previews on some episodes. We talked about the Time Meddler and how they gave away the spoiler of the Time Meddler in the choosing the black and white shot for that thumbnail for that episode. But yeah, it's interesting because Ambassadors of Death is almost often sort of forgotten, or we think of it as forgotten, or we think of it as the least regarded story of Series 7. But it is beloved enough that all these multiple colorization efforts going on over many years, and really we've only had fully restored color Ambassadors of Death for 11 years now. Like it's that recent. It is beloved enough.
Yeah, it's definitely beloved enough. I think there's a lot of things that kind of don't work here, and it's the colorization is good, even though I stand by that I wouldn't say it's wasted. It's just there's not enough visually interesting here to really stand out. Like not a thing like like the axons are just like full on. Oh yeah, like can you imagine the clouds of Axis in black and white? Like what you've cheated out of there. Not much of a comparison here. But
thank goodness they restored the colors on the spaceship, which came round in the last colorization round. Episode 1, by the way, is the first episode that the BBC actually preserved on videotape. It's the earliest videotape that we still have of any episode of Doctor Who.
Wow.
Yeah.
They were really thorough about like destroying everything up until in the 70s, right?
Yeah. But save that one. Save the first episode of Ambassadors of Death. It's kind of cool and it looks adult and interesting.
So I've got one more thing to talk about, and it's just a bit of a digression, bit of a Doctor Who continuity nerd digression. I have to confess.
Go for it. Nerd out.
This talks a lot about Mars. Well, what do we know about Mars in the Doctor Who universe?
Ice Warriors.
So a thing that comes up often, or used to anyway, was like, how are these Martians apparently here on Mars when we know that's where the Ice Warriors come from? Well, blink and you miss it. There's a little bit of dialogue that suggests these creatures are not from Mars, because Carrington seems convinced that they're here to invade the galaxy. Now, Doctor Who has always been a bit inconsistent in the classic series about what's the galaxy, what's the universe, what's your local star system. But why don't we take him at his word? And these are like aliens from some other galaxy that are coming here to do something, probably not invade, because they're sending ambassadors around, particularly to Earth. So that brings up sort of the whole question of what are they even doing here? Why are they coming to Earth? None of that's ever answered. Why are they even sending ambassadors? But
it almost feels like a first draft of Frontier in Space, doesn't it? Speaking of a place that we've been, like they're almost like treated as draconians. The whole question is like, is Earth going to be hyper paranoid of this race? So it has that feel that Mars is just a colony.
I would kind of argue there's a way to interpret this episode that Carrington was right all along.
Yeah.
Because there is a point where the aliens, because they haven't had their ambassadors return to them, threaten to destroy the world. They actually did say that, like, we will destroy your planet if you don't send our ambassadors back. It's like, whoa. That doesn't sound like a nice, benevolent race. Why don't you just assume this is a misunderstanding? And
are those three astronauts that you sent down? Are they the only diplomats in your entire culture? Like nobody else has any sense of diplomacy?
And I totally get that. If something is bad happening to your diplomats, you would be pissed about that and want to figure something out and maybe even get hostile. Would you wipe out the entire race or planet or country or whatever of whatever the other side of that? I think that's a little extreme. I think it's okay to call out that sort of extremist behavior. And I like that the 11th hour sort of gives you a bit of I don't think it's an explicit correction on the Ambassadors of Death, but when the Matt Smith Doctor basically calls back the aliens who were just threatening to destroy the world to get Prisoner Zero back, he gives them a very stern talking to. And I feel like that really lacks here because we didn't really talk much about the ending because there's not much of an ending. Like they just kind of retake the base and it just sort of stops. And there's a bad joke about shaking the hands of the astronauts that are killing people. And again, I'm sorry. I said I had one more thing to talk about, but I do have two. But they both have to do with the aliens. So the thing is, the Doctor says, well, they didn't know their touch was going to kill humans. To which I say, oh, come on. Like, they basically have contact detonation with their touch. And how do they not know they have that? Because they're destroying safes. They're electrifying gates. unless they're in some kind of living like electric world or whatever, or radiation world, and I guess they do maybe, but like surely they'd be aware that their touch has a very volatile reaction to anything that they touch. I mean, how would you not know you were going to kill someone?
Different cultures have different response, different ways of like greeting each other. And I'm going to say that in the ambassador's world, when you greet someone by touching their arm, and then they will ritually fall over to signal that they welcome your greeting. I mean, it's just, so they thought these guys, they're super polite. They've learnt our culture. Anyway, that's my headcanon.
That honestly does sound like a thing Pertwee would say. Like, that is a Pertwee level explanation. And then there's a giant rabbit that's also an ambassador. And they attach a mind probe to it, and it just blows up because they just truthfully say things.
I got to say, I do like it's a story where the Doctor goes the extra mile to, promote peace and to like go against xenophobia and paranoia, and it gave me Flatline vibes with the way the Doctor tries everything he can to reason with the boneless.
I think that's really good in that this shows that the aliens are not the menace, that it's the humans and the evil mastermind who's Carrington that's really doing this kind of essentially a false flag operation to turn world opinion against them. I think the overall structure and a lot of the scenes of Ambassadors of Death work really well, but I think one of the best things about it is what you just identified, is that theme of like flipping the lens, particularly if you think of coming after Spearhead from space and the Silurians, where the alien menace was a menace. That here it's the opposite, so it's nice choice.
And we don't have enough of that in Doctor. Certainly in early Doctor Who, you don't. The more common outcome is that they do actually turn out to be monsters, right? Even if the Doctor is a little, peaceful at the start, mostly monsters. And here is David Whittaker exiting the show with sort of this his final gift, his final template. He's sort of famous as a writer for doing a lot of templates that would be followed by later writers, right? And this is kind of one of them. Like, the Doctor is sort of a man of peace, and he's always going to kind of err on the side of, well, maybe they're friendly. We just don't know, even though they seem to be killing us by remote control. That may just be the bad guys.
You know what I just realized?
Yep.
It's funny. David Whittaker's initials are DW, and this is definitely a TLDW. Shouldn't slam the guy on his last story, but no, I think everything
TLDW. MH, because you've got to include Malcolm Hulk, who wrote the last 4 episodes, and apparently rewrote the first one as well, but was very much working to David Whittaker's notes. So certainly it's right that he has the credit for this one, even though Malcolm Hulk does a massive uncredited lift.
Well, that answers the question of authorship, but there are other questions that we need to answer about the Ambassadors of Death, and those are, of course, the 4 questions to Doomsday. First question: why did the randomizer take us here?
Well, I've already mentioned the impossible astronaut thing. I'm sorry. I'm sorry for skewing things, randomizer. I'll not do it again. My goodness, you scared me with this one. Sending men in spacesuits, aliens in spacesuits after me. Also, I mean, it's definitely the randomizer wants a season 7 big go. It loves anything where the TARDIS is taken apart. So obviously loves the TARDIS console being outside the TARDIS. Wanted to prove us wrong when we said in Inferno that was the first time that it happened. Taking us back to the pre-Inferno, really focusing on this season, wanting to get that bingo. I think it would be entirely appropriate if season 7 was the first one we completely did.
Yeah, man,
it would be great.
So my connection is that we came here from Meglos.
Yes, I couldn't find any Meglos connections, but go for it.
Well, here it is. It's that in both Meglos and the Ambassadors of Death, it's the henchman who has designs on taking the weapon and using it for themselves. Except here in Ambassadors of Death, he's actually effective and seems to be able to actually do it. Whereas in Megalos, it's Grugger's just kind of a boob. Unfortunately, due to some script editing there that didn't work out so well. So maybe that's also the sort of contrast. Whereas Malcolm Hulke here did right by Regan, whereas Chris Bidmead did not do that well to Grugger. So
he certainly didn't. A henchman done right. Interesting choice. Yeah, it's hard to see others. It's hard to see the through line. That's why I'm thinking kind of, I really skewed this experiment, and I'm so sorry. Now I know the randomizer is watching.
Accepted, Mr. Taylor. Feeling evil right then, but that's probably because I got evil on the brain. Because the second question is, what if the evil plot had succeeded?
Okay, so the evil plot is Carrington's, yes?
Yes.
He is trying to scare the world with this. By the way, there's the other impossible astronaut connection. It's like these are not only both stories that use astronaut suits in their scariest form, but also if we're talking about Day of the Moon as well, the insertion of a message across the world to change worldwide behavior, to turn the entire world against the silence in the Impossible Astronaut is kind of, that's basically what Carrington is trying to do here, right? Unmask these creatures, the whole world, and then they'll be like, oh, they're scary, let's blow things up, as if President Nixon would need that kind of encouragement. Or Kissinger, I'm sure Kissinger would be suggesting lobbing bombs at the thing, the mad bomber strategy. So
here's what I'm thinking on this. Okay, so what is the opposite of a fixed point in time? What's a point in time that is like in flux?
A flux point in time.
A flux point in time.
A fungible point in time. Yes.
To me, here's why I'm asking. It's I feel like Ambassadors of Death almost shows us a parallel Doctor Who world where everyone learns about aliens much earlier than the Christmas invasion, which then, regardless of whether the evil plot succeeds, I think that's kind of what it's showing. And you could suspect that if that happens, you have a more advanced world in the 21st century, and then some of the other classic Who interpretations of that century, like seeing the colony on Power of the Daleks and whatever else, this more sort of advanced stuff, and then the TMAT and Seeds of Death and all these other things turn out to happen. Whereas it obviously didn't turn out that way, and since New Who wants to do more, obviously, with contemporary world, you get the Waters of Mars, which explicitly says that's the first time humans have ever gone to Mars, which essentially ignores this story, right?
Yeah.
So I'm bringing it back to the question, what if it did succeed? What if there are two universes, one where Carrington is stopped and one where he succeeds? And in the one where he succeeds, he turned, basically what would happen is when the Brigadier goes to get the Doctor and Liz, he's almost defeated, right? They the unit, they're kind of boobs here. Like they kind of walk up to the mercenaries who are sort of surrendering, and then they get beaten down again. And only because the Brigadier barely tackles the one dude do they win. Well, what if it just goes the other way and they're all either shot or captured and they never make it back to the Space Center? Carrington succeeds in turning the world against the aliens, and then actually succeeds in destroying them. So in other words, the aliens don't just wipe out the Earth. They actually nuke the ship and it works. And maybe with this war started, and maybe the Doctor's still alive, he ends up helping the Earth in this war, and basically the Earth gets a little more advanced through this whole exercise. Because again, even though he's horrified at what Carrington's done, I mean, he just forgave the Brigadier for nuking the Silurians. So it's like, all right, I still like Earth. And that leads to the classic series version of the 21st century, as opposed to what really happens, which is that he's taken away and then it sort of just gets a little bit forgotten about and classified.
I mean, honestly, I joke about Nixon and Kissinger, but it is kind of hard to see the through line of how this evil plot was supposed to succeed. So, okay, he unmasks these creatures. Are we supposed to say that the entire world will agree, let's nuke these guys because they're blue and ugly?
Well, he'll point to the deaths they've caused and that they're
Right.
clearly doing some kind of infiltration or something like that.
Right, but surely there would be some due diligence that someone would... Like, it's not a ticking clock situation. Unless he invents a ticking clock situation.
Exactly. I think he would say, well, but it is a ticking clock situation because the alien just contacted Earth and said, we're going to destroy you all if we don't get our ambassadors back right away. So there's some deadline attached to that.
You'd have to edit that sentence all the way down to not key people in on what's happening here. That Earth has, in fact, stolen some diplomats. And you got to think, like, with the extreme polarization of Earth between the United States and the Soviet Union at this time. Sorry, Britain. I know you think you're going to be leading all those Mars missions, but let's get real about the state of the world at this point. They would sort of play off each other, as they often did during the Cold War, to look like the better, more civilized, nation or way of existing, right? The Soviets would be like, we don't agree with these capitalists want to nuke these blue aliens, and all they did was try to send some ambassadors to us, and that's typical of those capitalist pigs. And so then America would be embarrassed by that.
So there'd be some discussion.
There'd be some discussion. There'd be a heated United Nations meeting, in which perhaps the Doctor would give testimony. Unless so you kind of have to kill the Doctor. Yeah, right?
Yeah.
I want to see that on an Ambassadors of Death budget. Maybe CSO the Doctor in front of the UN delegations. But yeah.
Gotcha. So if People Plot succeeds, there's a big UN meeting.
Right. And the Doctor gets another chance to save the day. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
And also you got to think... There's also a question of like how close is this alien ship and how big is it? Because if you were to nuke it, you might get another sort of kill the moon style problem of like you've got just too much debris in space, and it's going to negatively impact Earth itself. So I think you might get one or two scientific examinations of that. And maybe that'd be another reason to not nuke them. Or maybe we do just sort of carelessly nuke them and then the Earth burns as this giant alien ship fills the atmosphere.
Okay.
Dark.
So we nuke the ship and then it crashes and kills us, or it just doesn't work?
Or just this whole thing of like if the moon was suddenly vaporized, right? That would destroy the Earth. That's in Neil Stephenson's 70. It's highly recommended. It was also the plot of Kill the Moon that would potentially happen. If the alien spacecraft is large enough and close enough to the Earth, then its debris would, could be large enough to fill the entire atmosphere, or enough of it so that it burns the atmosphere.
I got you. All right. So we either have a nuked alien ship, UN council meeting where they convince them not to nuke the alien ship, or classic Who 21st century. New 21st century pivot point, nexus point, flux point.
And I will say that if they nuke the ship and we all have to go live underground, then there's a Meglos connection.
Oh, there we go.
All worshipping a random 12-sided die.
All right, get us out of here on these weird continuities, and let's go to this one again and figure out where is the Clara Splinter.
Well, I did wonder. I was asking about the killing of the scientist to Lennox. Almost forgot your name. Sorry. Lennox, Cyril Shaps, great character actor. Anyway, I was wondering if like that was still a mystery, because that's where you can see Clara stepping in to put Lennox out of his misery.
So she's the one who gave him like the isotope rod. Is that what you're saying?
yeah, maybe.
Because you never see the face of the person.
You never see the face.
It's someone he doesn't recognize. So
yeah, because maybe maybe in an alternate version of this, he messes everything up.
Gotcha.
He's loyal to his conspiracy and stops the Doctor at some key moment.
All I can figure out is we have 60s, 70s Clara in her miniskirt running around the space center. And that is so distracting for the unit guys that they just get really, really bad at security. They're basically asleep at the wheel and waving her through things. Like, hey, we just waved, this pretty girl through. We might as well let the bakery guy go in. I mean, we're not really doing anything here.
She's waved in with giant bags of donuts. Like she's basically getting everyone hooked on carbs, so that the bakery truck ruse will actually work. Wait, is Clara working for the bad guys now? What's going on? She's part of the conspiracy. She's supposed to be working for the doctor.
Are Dunkin' Donuts.
Is she the one who leaves the TV on so the doctor watches it? By the way, that was real sort of Apollo era vibes, wasn't it? That the doctor is sort of glued to the screen along with everyone else.
Because that's what you did. By the way, it's like the level of transparency, I got to say, was impressive, and that like the broadcaster is right there when they're opening up the recovery capsule or whatever, or all the things they're doing. I mean, again, it's all based on the Apollo stuff and all the live footage, and that I guess would make sense. But like looking at it today, like that's such a shocking level of like he's just right there in the space center. We're gonna find out the same time you are. It's like okay.
And it's the media is kind of casual about the fact that there are missing astronauts, right? And maybe that's why the audience figures went down, is because we saw how obsessed the world became when there were actually astronauts in trouble, and we're sort of supposed to believe that, like, this is maybe not the lead item in the news. Oh, astronauts have gone missing on the way back from Mars. Such a shame.
That's very, very British story.
Yeah, exactly. They buried it. Clara is the one who's actually in the media telling people this doesn't matter. Now, I also like the notion that she's there to clear up the transmigration of object blunder in the script. Maybe she's invisible, Clara, and she's the one who's actually hiding the tape, and the doctor just comes up with some technobabble, or the doctor meets her at some earlier point in his adventure, and she convinces him that he can do transmigration of objects.
I like the idea that he's just making it up, because it's the classic, what does Smith say in Time of the Doctor? It's like, I'll just, hope something good happens, take the credit, which is, pretty much.
That's right. Rule number 1, the doctor lies about whether he can do transmigration of objects, and maybe it was invisible Clara all along.
There we go. All right, folks, time for the final question, the ultimate question, the only question that matters for the ambassadors of death. What did we think of this episode? The Pull to Open rating system, of course, has 6 ratings. There's the Dalek, which we give to a good episode of Doctor Who. The Ogron, which we give to a not-so-good episode of Doctor Who. The Professor Hater, which we give to a not-so-great episode, but hey, at least they tried something or we learned something. The Viscount Banger, which we give for the best of the best. The Fixed Point in Time, which is a show is beyond rating, sometimes for reasons of nostalgia, sometimes for other reasons. Or the Lady Cassandra, which is Doctor Who best looked at with the sound off and kind of as wallpaper in your next party.
Paper-thin plot, yes. Yeah, it's there are Cassandra-ish elements to this. Like if it was all like the alien spaceship, it would feel a bit Cassandra-ish. But I've got to say, to me, this is a clear-cut case of a Professor Hater.
Oh yeah.
There's
a lot of professors wandering around this one, so
many professors, so many beardy professors, and I to the point where I'm wondering, like, is this some sort of Professor Hater club that he's part of? Like, should he be drafted into this story? He's up there in Darlington College during the events of this. Yeah, Professor Hater. They're definitely trying something new with this whole season, of course, but especially with Ambassadors of Death. They're trying a lot of new things. They're throwing a lot of new stuff at the wall, seeing what sticks. It was very bold and brave of them to do this. To do the many new things, right down to the new uniforms, right down to the sting, the scream, which, it's almost worth giving this a Dalek just for the sting. But no, I'm going to say it's Professor Hater. What do you think?
Well, I'm giving it a Dalek for the sting. No, not just the sting. I am giving it a Dalek though, and it's kind of like what you said. This is a bold. That's not entirely an experiment, but yes, they do a lot of experimenting here. I think ultimately this episode succeeds in launching the Bond version of Pertwee. I think the things that do work are just sort of the overall feel you have in watching this thing. Yeah, there's things we picked at in our commentary and the aliens and whatever, but looking at this as kind of a standalone, the only thing that's really wrong with it, I think, is that it's too long.
Yep.
And I
would love to see a fan edit that takes this down to 3 or 4 episodes.
So it just has too much going for it for me not to call this a good episode of Doctor Who. This is a good episode of Doctor Who. It's not the best, but I'm glad I watched it. I think I had some fun watching it, and I would recommend it. I would say, Ambassadors of Death. It's definitely a different flavor than the other things in season 7, but I think that's good, and it gets you sort of going for what would become more of the sort of probably somewhat better executed, certainly more appropriate length Bond episodes that would come the following season.
Well, okay, I got one more thing to say, because I realized when we were talking about the sting and the scream at the start, I said we were going to praise the guy who created it, and we really should, because the more I discovered about him, his name is Brian Hodgson. The more I realized he's responsible for so many things. He devised the sound of the TARDIS.
The wheezing groaning sound.
Yes, the wheezing groaning sound. The backdoor key to his mother's house run along a bass string of a gutted piano. I mean, who would think to do that? It's amazing. He did the voice, figured out the voices of the Daleks, how to do the voice modulation.
Wow.
For that.
Wow. And he has done a lot of audio-ness.
Yeah.
The Doctor Who's known for, yeah.
Yeah, and not only did he do the sting, that sound that haunted my childhood, the scream, but also the thing at the end of the credits, the that's him. He added that here as well.
That's just him doing his greatest hits, right? That's the TARDIS noise, just kind of like compressed and done differently.
I don't know. I always felt that sound like, this is the weirdest thing of watching Doctor Who as a child. You sort of get weird sort of synesthesia with the theme tune. I think I had the weirdest synesthesia of that Zhuzh noise at the end sounds like rolling orange slices. Don't ask me why.
I gotta say, it gets you to go to the end as a fan.
Yeah.
You're like, kind of want, I can't stop watching until I hear the
exactly. It's so good, and it's such a good kind of, it's the exclamation mark of Doctor Who, right? Yeah. We were talking about Kerblam and Meglos and the Ambassadors of Death, and he comes up with it here, even though, I mean, this is a classic Professor Hater thing here of they tried that new musical sting out in a sort of a cold open situation. It didn't work, but they learned from it, and they grabbed that, and it made the credits so much better.
I wouldn't have minded seeing it again. I actually like the cold opens here. And if you think about it, that's kind of what New Who does, right?
Yeah.
They did a little experimenting in the first season, but mostly when there's a 2 or 3 parter, they would do the recap, the previously, and essentially lead it all the way up to the previous cliffhanger as the cold open, and then cut to the theme tune. So, ahead of its time, Ambassadors of Death.
Many more awesome things about Brian Hodgson, one of which he was born in Liverpool, go Liverpool. But also, he's still alive.
Oh, right.
He's still around.
Someone send him the link to this podcast.
Yeah. Let's have you on, Brian. Let's talk about how you created that scream. And I can present you with my therapist's bills over the year for how much time I had to spend hiding behind a sofa from that.
Awesome. Someone send me his WhatsApp.
Yeah.
Before we jump back into our own TARDIS console and cling on for dear life as we go from one universe to another, we would like to remind you, if you are listening on Spotify, vote now. Vote on your rating for the Ambassadors of Death. Do you agree with Chris? Is this a Professor Hater, a bold experiment that didn't quite work? Or do you agree with me? Is it a Dalek? Is this a good episode of Doctor Who? Or go ahead and give your own rating. Maybe you think it's one of the best of the best. Maybe it's a fixed point in time for you. It is your chance to vote. Fire up your app and tell us what you thought.
Yep. So pull that poll to open on Spotify. Leave us a review, leave us whatever comment you want. Refill our emoji deck so that I can be tortured next week. And yeah, it's time to jump back into our TARDIS, or at least just our TARDIS console, and disappear 15 minutes into the future, where we will know where we're going next. Seems an easier way of doing it than actually doing that, firing up the randomizer. But no, we here going the long way round will have to use that randomizer. The randomizer has two components. Pete has one. It's the codex. It's the list of all Doctor Who stories in sequential order, numerically listed with the ones that we've done taken out. We no longer have the state that we used to have, bouncing off stories we'd already done. If the randomizer chose them, we are more technologically advanced now. And Pete, what is the magic number?
The magic number is 204.
204 Doctor Who stories still to go. Many of your favorites among them. We could be hitting your favorite story right now when I enter this into random.org, which is a truly random service that relies on weird signals being broadcast by ambassadors in the atmosphere and or other atmospheric noise, and bases its randomness on that sort of thing. But just don't tell General Carrington, because he will want to nuke the atmosphere to prevent the non-pseudo randomness. Because he's owned by big pseudo-random algorithms, which is what computers do. That's who's really behind this conspiracy.
Sounds like it's our moral duty to activate the randomizer now. So
it is. But first,
offer some challenges for the randomizer, perhaps.
First, it is our moral duty to beg of the randomizer that it do something that might align with our desires. I'm going to say, since I kind of messed stuff up with the Impossible Astronaut, with that sort of thing, like, we've had many astronauts in Who history. This isn't even the first time. Ambassadors isn't even the first time the Doctor becomes an astronaut. That happened in the Troughton era as well. So take us to another astronaut of some sort.
Okay.
Another astronaut-based episode, or one where we see astronauts in it. That should give you a fairly broad range.
Possible or
Pete,
otherwise. Perhaps
Pete, what do you
possible
got?
astronauts.
Possible astronauts. Love it.
So I was disappointed with how Unit performed here. I think they can do better. Randomizer, show us an episode where Unit is not a bunch of boobs who get overpowered and snuck around left and right. Show us Unit actually being effective. And also, I think that's in keeping with the trailer that we were just talking about.
Yeah, clearly Unit has come a long way, and they no longer accept bakery van deliveries at Unit Tower.
It's a helicopter.
Unless it's by a helicopter.
Should admit that's fine.
That's right. They actually just have drones bringing in donuts, which I'm sure nothing could possibly go wrong with that. Anyway, Pete, give me the countdown. We'll find out where in the whole history of Who we are going next.
In 4, 3, 2, 1.
I am not amused.
12.
Whoa, back to Hartnell.
Yeah, it's got to be.
Oh my goodness, it is the Mythmakers.
Missing story.
Episode. Oh my.
Missing story alert. The whole story is missing, right?
It is entirely missing. That's correct.
Oh boy.
This is a season 3 number, which there's not a lot of complete ones.
Yeah, well, you know what? We know that the randomizer loves Vicky. And this is Vicky's swan song. Yes, she
Yes, it is.
Exit at this point, and we get a new TARDIS companion. Katerina is the companion who enters at this.
I think that sounds right. Yes.
Stage, yeah. So, wow. Okay, well, we're going to have to do. There's no animation for this. There's no talk of any animation for this one. We're just going to have to plunge into transcripts and telesnaps and novelizations and all of that. So it's going to be an interesting week ahead.
I think I've read this novel, but I've never sort of heard the audio or watched a sort of telesnap version of it, so I'm really excited to check this out because honestly, I can't remember anything that happens.
Yeah. Well, there's definitely no astronauts. We know that it is a pure-ish historical.
You know what there is, though? It's in close proximity to another story which we've done called the Celestial Toymaker. So it's a few stories out, but it's the same season. So
interesting. We have bounced off the Toymaker and we have landed in ancient Troy. This is fascinating. Well, obviously not a unit story, but you know what I think the connection might be here? Not to prejudice next week with the randomizer connection, but it seems that this is another episode that could do with an exclamation mark at the end. So we've had Meglos.
I don't know if makers is a good exclamation point quotient, but
the Mythmakers. Can't you see that as a Broadway musical?
My excitement has an exclamation mark, but folks have to find that excitement next week when we tackle the Mythmakers. Guys, this has been Pull to Open. It's a podcast. Podcasts are great for subscribing. Go ahead and do that, or hit a follow button on whatever app you in case you haven't done that already. Please review the podcast. It really does help us reach more listeners, or share the podcast with a friend. We are available on, of course, all the platforms: Apple, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music, and Google Podcasts. There's a bunch. Go ahead, just look. We'll find them. Guys, Martin West has done our music. It's great. Check it out. Check his link in the show notes, and follow us on the socials. We're on Twitter, Instagram, Threads, Pull to Open 63, and TikTok and Blue Sky at Pull to Open. We will make some myths next time, and we'll see you then.
Yep. See you with Vicky and Stephen in Troy, everyone.